In life, they say justice is blind, but sometimes, it's just corrupt. This is not just a crime story. It's a lesson. A lesson about betrayal, revenge, and the price of injustice. Chanel Brooks. A daughter. A bright student with dreams. She was supposed to have a future. Instead, she became a victim of those who were meant to protect her. A father. A butcher. A man who lost everything. And when the system failed him, he did what he knew best. He turned the tools of his trade into weapons of revenge. This is the chilling true crime story of Lamont Brooks, a father who became a hunter. What happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 2018 was not just murder. It was a lesson. A lesson about betrayal, revenge, and the price of injustice. And in 2018, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the hunt began. The city was alive with the usual noises: cars honking, people talking, street lights flickering. But somewhere in the darkness, a man was waiting. Waiting for the moment he had been preparing for 10 long years. Lamont Brooks was not the same man who had entered prison a decade ago. Back then, he was just a grieving father, broken and desperate for justice. But now, he was something else. Something unstoppable. As he stepped onto the streets once again, the air felt different. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lifting off his shoulders. His time had finally come. Justice had failed him. The system had betrayed him. But tonight, he would make things right. 16-year-old Chanel Brooks was walking home from school that evening, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her mind still filled with formulas and equations from her advanced placement chemistry class. She was a bright student, a girl full of potential, someone her teachers often said was destined for great things. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to help people. She believed in justice. But justice was never meant for girls like Chanel. It was a warm evening in Baton Rouge, the streets still buzzing with life. Street lights flickered on as the sky darkened, and Chanel quickened her steps. She had walked this road hundreds of times before. It was familiar, safe. Until it wasn't. The sound of an approaching car made her glance over her shoulder. A police patrol vehicle. Not unusual. But something about the way it slowed down beside her made her uneasy. The window rolled down, and 3 men looked at her. 3 men in police uniforms. 3 men who were supposed to serve and protect. But these weren't officers of the law. They were predators in uniform. Officer Michael Bryson, 34. Officer Thomas Hoffman, 29. Officer Kevin Ridgway, 31. They had been drinking. They had power. And Chanel had none. "Where you headed, sweetheart?" one of them slurred. She ignored them and walked faster. She knew better than to engage. But knowing better wouldn't save her. The car jerked forward, blocking her path. She turned. She ran. She didn't get far. A hand grabbed her wrist, yanking her back so hard she stumbled. She screamed. Someone had to hear her, someone had to help. But the street was empty. A door opened. Rough hands pulled her inside. The patrol car sped off. And Chanel Brooks disappeared into the night. They took her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. A place where no one would hear her scream. A place where they had all the time in the world. What happened inside those walls was unspeakable. For 3 hours, she fought. For 3 hours, she suffered. For 3 hours, she begged for mercy that never came. The men laughed at her pain. They mocked her cries. And when they were done, they left her there broken, bleeding, barely alive. They thought that was the end of it. But monsters don't just destroy bodies. They destroy souls. And Chanel had a soul too kind for this world. She made it home. But home wasn't home anymore. It was a prison. A prison where she lived in fear, knowing that at any moment, they could come back. And they did. They parked outside her house. They followed her when she walked to the store. They made sure she knew if she talked, her family would pay the price. Officer Bryson would flash his badge at her father, mocking him with his authority. Officer Hoffman would smile at her in the hallways, like nothing ever happened. Officer Ridgway. He didn't even bother hiding his threats. Tell anyone, and it'll be the last thing you ever do. Her world collapsed. She stopped going to school. She stopped eating. She stopped being Chanel. She tried to tell her father. But how do you tell a man like Lamont Brooks, a man who spent his life cutting meat with precision and care, that the world had carved his daughter into something unrecognizable? How do you tell him that the people he trusted to protect his family were the very ones who destroyed it? She didn't have the words. So instead, she picked up a pen. And she wrote. September 12, 2008, the day the world went silent. It was a quiet afternoon when Lamont Brooks came home from work. He called out to Chanel. No answer. He checked the kitchen. Nothing. And then, he saw the door to her room slightly ajar. Something inside him screamed not to go in. But he did. And there, in the dim light, his baby girl was lying still. She had ended her own pain. Because the world had given her no other choice. Beside her, a note. He picked it up, his hands shaking. And as he read, his heart broke. She named them. She named them all. She begged for justice. And in that moment, Lamont Brooks made a promise. A promise that justice would come. One way or another. Lamont took the note straight to the police station. He placed it on the desk of the chief of police. This is my daughter's suicide note. These are the names of the men who did this. I want justice. They laughed at him. They told him Chanel was just a troubled girl. That she had imagined it. And just like that, the case was closed. The officers. They kept their jobs. They went back to their lives. And one of them, Kevin Ridgway. He was promoted. Promoted to county sheriff. That day, Lamont Brooks didn't just bury his daughter. He buried his faith in justice. He buried his belief in the system. But deep inside him, something else was born. Something dark. Something patient. Something unstoppable. Lamont Brooks, a butcher by trade, became something else entirely. He became a man with a plan. And he had 10 years to perfect it. The courtroom was silent. All eyes were on Lamont Brooks, standing before the judge, his fists clenched, his breathing slow and measured. He had already lost everything: his daughter, his faith in the system, his reason for believing in justice. And yet, the final insult came when the verdict was read. Guilty. 10 years in prison for assaulting an officer. The words rang in his ears. The same officer who took his daughter from him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to tear the whole courthouse apart. But instead, he stood there. Silent. Still. Because a man who loses everything has only one thing left. Time. They sent him to Louisiana State Penitentiary, the worst of the worst. A place where monsters were kept. Murderers. Gang leaders. Lifers who had nothing left to lose. And in the middle of it all, a butcher. The guards expected him to break. But Lamont Brooks? He adapted. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He didn't cause trouble. Because trouble would do nothing for him. Instead, he worked. From the moment he entered prison, Lamont chose his place carefully. He asked for work. Hard work. The kind that nobody else wanted. And they gave it to him. The prison's meat processing facility. To the other inmates, it was just a job. A way to pass the time. A way to earn a few privileges. But to Lamont, it was preparation. Every day, he worked silently with a knife in his hands. He learned to cut with precision. To butcher without hesitation. To separate flesh from bone with practiced ease. It was muscle memory. It was discipline. It was focus. And all the while, he was waiting. Lamont Brooks was no fool. If he wanted revenge, he had to be smart. If he wanted to make them pay, he had to play the game. So he became exactly what they wanted him to be. A model prisoner. He took anger management classes. He attended rehabilitation programs. He enrolled in business courses. He smiled when they told him he was making progress. He nodded when they said he was turning his life around. He earned their trust. And while they saw a changed man, he was sharpening his knives. Day after day. Year after year. The world outside moved on. The men who took his daughter lived their lives freely. One of them even became county sheriff. And Lamont? He waited. He listened. His sister, Marion, visited him often. She told him everything. She told him where they lived, where they worked, what they were doing. And Lamont? He never reacted. He simply nodded, smiled, and spoke about his plans for the future. When I get out, I'll open my own butcher shop. I just want a quiet life. I'm a different man now. And they believed him. Because everyone believes a man who is patient. But patience is just controlled rage. And rage never dies. August 15, 2018. 10 years. 120 months. 3,650 days. And now, he was free. Lamont Brooks stepped out of the prison gates, carrying only a small bag. Inside were two things: his certification in advanced meat processing, and his business management diploma. The guards shook his hand. "Stay out of trouble, Brooks." He nodded. "I will." He walked down the road, the heat pressing down on him. He didn't look back. Because his past was not behind him. It was waiting for him out there. And 2 months later, the first body appeared. Michael Bryson had moved on. He had escaped justice. And in the 10 years since Chanel Brooks' death, he had built himself a good life. A nice house. A successful gym. A reputation as a respected businessman in Baton Rouge. To the world, he was just another ex-cop turned entrepreneur. But the truth? Michael Bryson was a monster in disguise. And monsters always pay their debts. October 12, 2018, the night it began. It was late when Bryson locked up his gym. Another long day of training clients, shaking hands, pretending to be a good man. The city was quiet. The streets were empty. Bryson didn't notice the figure across the street, standing in the shadows, watching, waiting. He climbed into his car, turned the key. Nothing. His engine was dead. He sighed, frustrated. Tried again. Still nothing. Then, in the reflection of his rearview mirror, a shadow moved. Bryson barely had time to react before a strong hand yanked open his door. A sharp pain exploded in his ribs. A strike fast and calculated that stole his breath. Before he could shout, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth. And the world went dark. When Bryson woke up, he was somewhere familiar. His own gym. But it wasn't the same. The lights were off. The air was cold. And he wasn't alone. He tried to move. He couldn't. His arms and legs were tied down, restrained by the very workout equipment he had used every day. The weight bench beneath him pressed against his spine. His wrists locked in place with steel handcuffs, looped through the very pull-up bar he had installed himself. And then he saw him. A figure standing in the shadows. Silent. Still. Watching. Bryson's heart pounded. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure took a step forward. And then another. Until the light from the gym's neon sign caught his face. The breath in Bryson's lungs froze. Because he knew that face. It was older now. More hardened. More dangerous. But there was no mistaking it. Lamont Brooks. Bryson tried to laugh it off. "Took you long enough," he sneered. Lamont said nothing. He simply reached into his bag and pulled out a butcher's cleaver. The kind used to break bones cleanly. The kind Lamont had used every single day in prison. Bryson's smile faded. "You don't have to do this," he tried, his voice shaking now. Still, Lamont said nothing. Instead, he slowly, methodically laid out his tools. A cleaver. A boning knife. A bone saw. All shining under the gym lights. And then, finally, Lamont spoke. "You remember my daughter?" Silence. "You remember what you did to her?" Bryson swallowed hard. "You got the wrong guy, man," he whispered. "Wrong answer." Lamont tilted his head, studying him. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was old, the edges worn and creased. Bryson's blood ran cold. Because he knew what it was before Lamont even said the words. Chanel Brooks' suicide note. He tried to look away. Lamont grabbed his jaw, forcing him to read it. "She wrote your name," Lamont said. Bryson shook his head, trembling. "It wasn't my fault." Lamont's grip tightened. "She was 16. And then, finally." Lamont smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a forgiving smile. It was the smile of a butcher. And the real work began. No one heard his screams. No one came to help. Because Lamont had planned every detail. The gym was soundproof. The security cameras disabled. The exits blocked. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. Every cut Lamont made was deliberate. Precise. Cold. He didn't just kill Bryson. He taught him what pain felt like. The same pain Chanel had suffered. The same injuries she had endured. Every broken rib. Every bruise. Every wound. One by one, he mirrored them all. Bryson begged. He pleaded. but mercy was for innocent men. And Michael Bryson was not innocent. By the time the sun rose over Baton Rouge, Michael Bryson was gone. Not missing. Not dead. Just gone. His body never recovered. His gym scrubbed clean. Lamont had spent 10 years perfecting his craft. And that night, he disappeared Bryson like a professional. The only thing left behind? A note taped to the gym's front door. It had only 4 words. She was 16. Justice. By the time the police arrived, they found a crime scene with no crime. No body. No fingerprints. No security footage. Nothing. Just a missing man. And a community that did not care. Because in the hearts of the people, Michael Bryson wasn't a victim. He was a debt finally paid. But there were still 2 names left on the list. And Lamont Brooks? He was just getting started. Because the next one was already on the way. Thomas Hoffman had spent the last 10 years convincing himself that what happened to Chanel Brooks was nothing more than a bad memory. She was gone, and no one had ever dared to question him. Michael Bryson's disappearance had shaken him, but he told himself it was a coincidence. Until he saw the note taped to the gym door. She was 16. Justice. Then, he knew. This wasn't a coincidence. This was vengeance. And he was next. Hoffman wasn't stupid. He had been a cop for years. Then a private investigator. He knew how these things worked. When men like Michael Bryson disappeared, it meant only one thing. The past was coming back to collect. And he wasn't ready to pay. So, he prepared. He installed cameras all over his property. Reinforced his office door with a steel lock. Kept 2 loaded pistols within arm's reach at all times. And most of all, he watched his back. For days, he felt like someone was watching him. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe it was real. November 3, 2018. The rain poured outside as Thomas Hoffman locked the door to his private investigation office. The city was quiet, but his nerves were on high alert. He checked his gun. Checked the security cameras. Checked the shadows. He wasn't going down like Bryson. Not without a fight. Then, a click from behind him. His blood ran cold. He spun, gun raised. But it was too late. The lights cut out. The hunt had begun. Hoffman wasn't defenseless. He had spent years training, learning how to survive. The first shot exploded through the darkness. A miss. The second shot, another miss. He could hear footsteps, slow and methodical, circling him in the darkness. Then, a hand grabbed his wrist. Twisted it. The gun clattered to the floor. And before Hoffman could react, a fist crashed into his ribs, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled back, scrambling for the backup gun in his ankle holster. But a foot stomped down on his wrist, pinning him. And then, a voice. Calm. Cold. Familiar. You fought back harder than Bryson. Hoffman's stomach dropped. Because he knew who it was. And he knew. He wasn't getting out of this. When Hoffman woke up, his body ached. His wrists were bound. His legs were strapped down. And the air around him. Freezing. His breath came out in white puffs as he struggled against the restraints. Then he realized where he was. His own industrial freezer. The same one he used to store surveillance equipment. The same one that was now his tomb. And standing just a few feet away, Lamont Brooks. Lamont wasn't rushed. He took his time. Because this wasn't just about killing Hoffman. It was about teaching him a lesson. Do you remember her? Hoffman tried to speak, but his teeth chattered from the cold. Lamont continued, his voice steady. My daughter. You broke her ribs. Hoffman's breath hitched. You kicked her when she begged for mercy. He took a step closer, pulling a boning knife from his belt. You laughed while she cried. The blade glinted under the flickering freezer light. And then, the real work began. When they found Hoffman's body, it was perfectly preserved. Frozen inside his own industrial freezer. Every wound was precise. Every cut was calculated. The medical examiner noted something chilling. The injuries exactly mirrored Chanel Brooks' autopsy report. Rib fractures. Deep lacerations. Cranial trauma. Hoffman's final moments had been spent feeling exactly what Chanel had felt. And beside his body, a single sheet of paper, taped to the freezer door. 4 words. She was 16. Justice. By now, law enforcement knew what was happening. They knew who was responsible. But they couldn't stop it. Because there was still one name left on the list. And Lamont Brooks? He wasn't done yet. Kevin Ridgway had built his career on power. He had climbed the ranks, moved past the mistakes of his past, and now sat at the very top. Sheriff. A position of authority. A seat of control. For 10 years, he had lived without fear. But now he felt it in his bones. Because the past wasn't forgotten. The past had a name. And the past was coming for him. From the moment Thomas Hoffman's body was found, Ridgway knew. He was next. He wasn't going to end up like Bryson. He wasn't going to end up like Hoffman. He was smarter than them. He was prepared. So, he fortified his home. Steel gates. Surveillance cameras on every corner. Armed bodyguards patrolling the property. A panic room with reinforced doors. He wasn't taking any chances. But all the security in the world wouldn't save him. Because the hunter was patient. And on November 17, 2018, the hunt ended. It started with the security team. There were 2 men on the property that night. Both were professionals. Ex-military. Armed. Trained. But they weren't prepared for this. Because the hunter didn't just attack. He waited. Studied their routines. Learned their weaknesses. Chose the perfect moment. And when it came, they never saw it coming. The first guard fell silently. A single, precise strike to the throat. The second, a brief struggle. A snap of bone. Then silence. The cameras. Disabled. The alarms. Never even had the chance to ring. And by the time Ridgway realized something was wrong, it was too late. Ridgway ran. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't planning. He was terrified. He rushed to his panic room, slamming the door behind him, locking himself inside. He gasped for air, his heart pounding, his hands shaking as he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Ridgway, I need immediate backup." The dispatcher's voice crackled back. "Sir, what's going on?" But before Ridgway could answer, a sound echoed through the house. A click. Then another. and another. Then, bang! A gunshot. Right outside the panic room. Then silence. Ridgway pressed himself against the wall, clutching his gun. He waited. Minutes passed. Then, a voice. Soft. Calm. Familiar. "You know why I'm here." Ridgway's blood turned to ice. Lamont Brooks. Ridgway's fingers tightened around his gun. He couldn't see him, but he knew. Lamont was out there. And he wasn't going away. The sheriff forced his voice to stay calm. "You don't have to do this," he called out. Silence. Then, "Yes, I do." A single, heavy thump rattled the panic room door. Then another. Then another. Ridgway backed away. Crack. The lock snapped. The steel door swung open. And there he was. Lamont Brooks. Standing in the doorway. Holding a butcher's cleaver in one hand. And a gun in the other. His face. Calm. His eyes. Dead. Ridgway raised his gun, but Lamont was faster. A shot rang out. A white-hot pain exploded in Ridgway's shoulder. His gun clattered to the floor. And then, Lamont stepped inside. And closed the door behind him. For 12 long hours, Ridgway endured what Chanel had suffered. Every injury. Every pain. Every moment of fear. Lamont didn't rush. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was justice. Ridgway begged. He screamed. But there were no corrupt cops to save him. No cover UPS. No way out. Only the truth. And in the final moments, Lamont forced Ridgway to talk. To confess. And he did. On tape. He revealed everything. The cover UPS. The evidence destroyed. The other victims. Years of corruption, finally exposed. And when it was over, Ridgway wept. Because he knew. This wasn't just the end of his life. This was the end of his legacy. And then, the hunter finished his work. And disappeared into the night. By the time law enforcement arrived, the house was empty. No body. No sign of struggle. No fingerprints. Just one thing. A USB drive, sitting on the sheriff's desk. Inside it, the recording of Ridgway's confession. His voice shaking. His words damning. And the last thing he ever said. She was right. Chanel Brooks was right. Lamont Brooks had done what the system failed to do. He delivered justice. And then, he disappeared. No one knew where he went. No one saw him leave. It was like he had never existed at all. But one thing was certain. The name Chanel Brooks would never be forgotten. Because her father had made sure the world would remember. And with that, the hunter's story came to a close. But the legend was just beginning. Lamont Brooks had spent 10 years planning. He had studied his targets. He had perfected his craft. He had executed his justice with surgical precision. And now, it was over. Or at least, that's what the world thought. Because Lamont Brooks wasn't done yet. Not until they caught him. And not until he decided to let them. By the time law enforcement arrived at Sheriff Ridgway's house, the place was silent. No body. No struggle. No signs of forced entry or escape. Just the confession tape, sitting there like a ticking time bomb. The contents. Devastating. By sunrise, news channels across the country were playing Ridgway's final words. The Baton Rouge Police Department crumbled overnight. Officials resigned. Internal Affairs launched investigations. Public outrage turned into protests. But while the world focused on the scandal, the real story was still unfolding. Lamont Brooks was gone. And the biggest manhunt in Louisiana history had just begun. For 3 weeks, Lamont Brooks was nowhere to be found. No sightings. No leads. No mistakes. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. But in reality, he was watching. Moving through the back roads and shadows of Baton Rouge, he stayed ahead of the law, slipping through their fingers like a ghost. The police were hunting him, but they were hunting the wrong way. Because Lamont knew how they worked. He had studied them, planned for them, predicted every single step. And every time they got close, he was already 2 steps ahead. November 20th, 2018. 4:30 a.m. The Pine Tree Motel. A rundown place at the edge of town. Cheap. Quiet. Forgettable. It was the perfect place to disappear. But that morning, the silence was shattered. A SWAT team surrounded the building. Snipers on the rooftops. Agents at every exit. Helicopters circling above. This wasn't an arrest. This was a war zone. Inside room 217, Lamont Brooks sat at the edge of the bed, his back against the wall. A loaded gun rested in his lap. His butcher's cleaver, the same one he had used on Bryson, Hoffman, and Ridgway, lay beside him. He had known this moment would come. And he was ready for it. The SWAT commander lifted a megaphone. "Lamont Brooks, come out with your hands up." Silence. "This is your final warning." Inside the room, Lamont exhaled slowly. Then, bang. A gunshot exploded from inside, tearing through the motel door. The standoff erupted into chaos. The first SWAT officer breached and Lamont took his shot. A bullet ripped through the officer's vest, knocking him back. Another shot. Another officer down. Lamont moved like a trained soldier, precision, patience, control. Even wounded, he fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. He knew the layout of the room. He had positioned himself for the best tactical advantage. Every shot was calculated. Every move was deliberate. He was outnumbered, outgunned. But he wasn't outmatched. The fight raged on. A grenade smashed through the window. Tear gas filled the room. Lamont didn't panic. Even as the gas burned his lungs, even as his vision blurred, he remained calm. Because this wasn't the end. This was just another piece of the plan. When the SWAT team stormed inside, they found what they least expected. A man standing tall. His face expressionless. His hands raised. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He didn't beg. He simply stared them down. And then he surrendered. The FBI knew who they were dealing with. Lamont Brooks wasn't some common criminal. He was a ghost. A planner. A man who had outsmarted them at every turn. For 6 hours, he sat in the interrogation room. Silent. He refused to speak. Refused to answer questions. Refused to acknowledge their presence. No emotion. No regret. Nothing. They pushed him. They threatened him. Still nothing. Then, one of the agents placed something on the table. A piece of old paper. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded. Lamont's eyes flickered downward. And for the first time, his expression changed. It was his daughter's suicide note. The one that had been erased from evidence. The one Ridgway had kept as a trophy. The one that proved everything. Lamont stared at it for a long time. Then, finally, he spoke. Just 6 words. His first and last statement. The system failed her. I didn't. And with that, the butcher's revenge was complete. Justice. Revenge. 2 sides of the same coin. For 10 years, Lamont Brooks waited. For 10 years, he sharpened his skills, not just as a butcher, but as a man seeking justice in a world that had denied him. Was he a monster? Or was he simply a father who had no other choice? Some call him a criminal. Others call him a hero. But one thing is certain. His story will never be forgotten. His name became a whispered legend. The man who did what the law refused to do. Some say he was just another vigilante. Others say he was a symbol of justice. And then there are those who believe that he was right. That sometimes, when the system fails, justice is something you have to take with your own hands. Because the scariest stories aren't the ones made up in books. They're the true ones. Like this one. Was Lamont Brooks a cold-blooded killer? Or was he a man fighting back against corruption? What would you have done in his situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love true crime stories about love, betrayal, and revenge, make sure to subscribe for more. Because sometimes, the truth is more terrifying than fiction. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, share, and comment. Your support helps bring more incredible stories to life. And remember, justice isn't always served in a courtroom. Sometimes, it comes from the shadows. Stay tuned for more stories of love, betrayal, and the human spirit. Because in the end, every story has 2 sides. Which one do you believe?